I never thought I'd catch feelings for my straight best friend. Honestly, I don't even know when it started. One day we were just two guys who happened to like the same terrible jokes and the same indie bands. And the next, I was lying awake thinking about the way his smile hits his eyes when he's genuinely happy. It's the kind of thing you don't plan for, especially when everyone around you has already signed him off as totally straight, including him. His name's Ben, and we met back in college. We were both those awkward freshmen who somehow ended up in the same philosophy seminar, the one class that made us question all the bad decisions that got us there in the first place. He was the kind of guy who could make a snarky comment about Descartes and then somehow make it funny. I guess that's what pulled me in at first, his wit. And then, well, everything else just fell into place. Ben's got this easygoing vibe that's infectious. He's tall, lean, with these messy, dark curls that he swears he doesn't style but always looks like he just rolled out of bed and into a movie scene. People tend to think he's the classic jock type, mostly because he's good at soccer and has a knack for making friends everywhere. But behind that, he's a total nerd who'll argue for hours about comic books or the best pizza joint in town. That duality is what made our friendship feel effortless. He wasn't one thing, and neither was I. We've been inseparable ever since that first semester, sharing everything from bad dates to late-night study sessions that usually ended with more laughter than actual work. I was always the gay friend, the one who gave him relationship advice with a smirk, because honestly, I never thought I'd have to take my own. Ben was straight, he told me so plenty of times, and I believed him. It was like a given, a rule we both accepted without question. But here's the thing about rules. They're made to be broken, or sometimes quietly rewritten in the background while you're not looking. It started small, those moments when I caught him staring a little longer than usual, or the way he'd brush his hand against mine and then quickly pull away. I chalked it up to me overthinking. Because, well, that's what you do when you're crushing on someone who's not supposed to crush back. This all came to a head last weekend. We were sitting on the rooftop of his apartment building, the city sprawling beneath us with its usual mix of noise and lights. We'd been drinking, as we often do, and talking about everything and nothing. Then, out of nowhere, he said something that stopped me cold. Have you ever thought maybe I'm not as straight as I say? It was like the ground shifted beneath me. I wanted to laugh it off, to tell him he was messing with me, but I could see it in his eyes. There was something real there, something he'd been holding in for a long time, and that's where I am now, stuck between what I thought I knew and what I'm just starting to understand. Ben, my straight best friend, just dropped the biggest bombshell, and honestly, I don't know how this story ends, but if you want to know how it all went down, buckle up, because it's not your typical friendship tale. I blinked a few times, trying to make sense of what he'd just said. Like, was this a joke? Because if it was a pretty good one, and I was about to laugh, but the look on his face told me otherwise. He was serious, maybe more serious than I'd ever seen him. No, seriously, he said, rubbing the back of his neck, the kind of nervous gesture I'd never thought I'd see from Ben. I mean, I've been thinking about it a lot lately, about who I am and what I want. And I guess I'm just figuring things out. It felt like the air got thicker around us, like the city noises were fading into the background. For once, I didn't have a snarky comment ready. Hell, I didn't even know how to respond. I was used to being the one who had it all figured out, or at least pretending to. But here he was, my supposedly straight best friend, cracking open a part of himself I never knew existed. Okay, I finally said, trying to keep my voice steady. What brought this on? He sighed and looked out over the city, like the answer was out there somewhere in the neon blur. I don't know. Maybe it's just the pressure of always having to be the straight guy. I've been dating girls because it's easier, I guess, but it never really felt right. Hearing him say that out loud made something inside me shift. It wasn't just about the crush anymore. It was about him trusting me enough to be honest. Ben, I said, reaching out and lightly bumping his shoulder, you don't have to pretend with me. Ever. He gave me a shy smile, the kind that made my stomach flip, in a way I'm still not sure is entirely healthy. Thanks, man. That means a lot. We sat there for a while, just taking in the night and the city lights. I wanted to ask a million questions, but I also didn't want to push him. After all, this was new territory for both of us, even if I'd been dancing around my feelings for years. A few days passed, and things between us felt different. Not awkward, exactly, but charged with something unspoken. I caught him glancing my way more often, and I swear I saw the tiniest hint of a smile whenever our eyes met. It was like we were on the edge of something, but neither of us was ready to jump yet. One afternoon, we met up at our usual coffee spot, the one with the bad espresso but great conversation. He showed up wearing that old leather jacket I'd always thought looked good on him, and I swear, my heart did that stupid little stutter thing. So, I started, trying to sound casual. "How are you doing?" "Like, really doing?" He shrugged. Honestly? Confused, but also kind of relieved. "I told a couple of people. Not many, but it felt good." I nodded, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. "That's brave, Ben." He smiled, then looked down at his coffee. "There's something else, though." His voice dropped just enough to make me lean in. "I think I've been trying to figure out if I'm into guys like you." That last part hit me like a punch to the chest, but in the best possible way. "Wait," I said, heart racing. "You mean me?" He met my gaze, eyes wide and a little scared. "Yeah, I mean, you're my best friend, so it's terrifying to admit, but yeah." I couldn't help the grin that spread across my face. "Well, it's a good thing I'm here then, right?" He laughed, the tension breaking between us like a wave. "Yeah, it is." From that moment, things started to shift in small but undeniable ways. We'd text more, late at night, sharing thoughts and feelings we'd never voiced before. He'd catch me looking at him and hold my gaze a second longer, a silent question hanging in the air. And every time, my heart would do that ridiculous stutter again. One evening, after a movie marathon at his place, we ended up sitting close on the couch, the kind of close that felt electric but not awkward. The credits were rolling, but neither of us was paying attention. "Can I ask you something?" Ben said, voice barely above a whisper. "Anything." He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "What if this changes everything?" "Us, I mean. What if we mess up a friendship that's important to both of us?" I looked at him, really looked at him. "Then we figure it out. Together. I don't want to lose you, Ben. Not as a friend, and not as anything else either." He smiled, this time without any hesitation. "Me neither." And just like that, it felt like the universe was giving us permission to see where this could go. It wasn't perfect, and it definitely wasn't easy, but it was real. And after years of pretending, that felt like the best thing in the world. So yeah, my straight best friend might not be so straight after all. And I guess neither am I when it comes to him. But that's a story for another night. After that night, the dynamic between Ben and me didn't flip overnight, but it definitely shifted. It was like we were both fumbling in the dark, trying to find a new way to be around each other without breaking what we'd built over the years. The funny thing was, it felt less scary than I'd imagined, mostly because Ben was being so genuine, and that made it easier for me to be honest too. A few days later, we decided to meet up again. This time, we went for a walk in the city park, one of those spots where the trees still manage to block out the noise, and you can almost forget you're surrounded by a million people. We walked side by side, the kind of comfortable silence between old friends, but with this subtle undercurrent of something more. So, Ben said after a while, nudging me with his elbow, "Have you always known that you liked guys?" I laughed nervously. "Pretty much. I mean, I guess I spent a lot of time pretending it wasn't a big deal, but yeah. What about you? When did this start?" He looked down at his feet, kicking a pebble along the path. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I've been scared to admit it, even to myself. There's a lot wrapped up in expectations. Family, friends, who I thought I was supposed to be. It's confusing." I nodded. "I get that. It's not like there's a manual for this kind of stuff." He glanced over at me, his eyes softening. "Does it scare you?" "What's happening between us?" "Terrifies me," I admitted with a grin. in a good way, like finally feeling like I'm not alone in this. We paused by a bench, and without thinking, I reached out and took his hand. It was tentative, like testing the waters, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he squeezed back gently. That simple touch spoke volumes. All the unspoken feelings, the late-night texts, the stolen glances. It was all there, raw and real. As the weeks went by, we started exploring this new chapter together. We were still best friends, but now there was this added layer of closeness that made every conversation, every laugh, every touch feel charged. It was exhilarating and sometimes terrifying. I found myself replaying moments in my head, wondering if he felt the same sparks I did. One Friday night, Ben invited me over for dinner. He'd cooked, something he bragged about being experimental, which usually meant we were in for a laugh and some questionable food. We ate, drank wine, and talked about everything from movies to dreams. As the night wore on, the air between us thickened. "I want to be honest with you about something else," he said, setting his glass down. I looked at him, curious. I've been scared of what people might think. What my family might say if they knew I was. Well, this. I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. "I get that fear, but you're not alone anymore." He smiled, this time without any hesitation. "Thanks. That means more than you know." Later, after cleaning up, we ended up back on the couch, sitting close, the kind of close that felt like a promise. I could feel my heart pounding as I edged a little nearer. "Can I kiss you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, eyes shining. That first kiss was everything I hoped it would be. Soft, tentative, full of all the things we hadn't said out loud. It was the start of something new. Fragile, but beautiful. In the following days, we navigated this new territory with the awkwardness and excitement of two people discovering themselves. There were moments of doubt, sure. Times when Ben questioned if he was ready to take this out into the world. But there were also moments of pure joy, like holding hands in public and feeling like we belonged together. One afternoon we went to a bookstore, our favorite weekend ritual. We wandered the aisles, picking out books for each other, sharing recommendations. At one point, Ben pulled me aside to a quiet corner. "I've been thinking," he said, "maybe it's time I told a few more people. I want to stop hiding." I felt this swell of pride and nervousness. "I'm here for you, whatever you need." He smiled, leaning his head on my shoulder. "Thanks, man, for everything." And that's how it's been. Slow, messy, but real. Ben and I, two guys who started out as best friends, now figuring out what it means to be something more. It's not perfect, and there are days when the uncertainty creeps in, but there's also this incredible feeling of hope. Because sometimes, the best stories aren't the ones you plan. They're the ones that catch you off guard and make you believe in something new. And with Ben, I'm ready to find out where this story goes. The weeks that followed felt like walking a tightrope, thrilling and nerve-wracking all at once. Ben and I were still finding our footing, learning how to balance the history of our friendship with the new feelings that were blossoming between us. It was strange, in a good way, to see him in this light, not just as the funny, sarcastic best friend, but as someone who looked at me with a softness that made my chest tighten. One Friday evening, he invited me over again. This time, it was just to watch a new show he'd been obsessing over. I showed up, expecting the usual low-key hangout, but there was an unspoken energy in the air. He greeted me with a smile that lingered longer than usual, and I caught the scent of his cologne, something woodsy and subtle, that reminded me just how much I missed being this close to him. We settled on the couch, and as the show played, our legs brushed. I didn't pull away, and neither did he. Instead, his hand found mine, fingers intertwining almost naturally. The world shrank to the rhythm of our breaths and the soft glow of the TV. After the episode ended, Ben turned to me, eyes searching. "Can I be honest?" "Always." "I'm scared," he said, voice low. "Not just about us, but about everything. What if this changes things with my family? What if I lose friends?" "I don't want to lose you either." I squeezed his hand. "Hey, I'm scared too. But if this is real, we figure it out. Together. He nodded, resting his head on my shoulder. That night, we stayed up talking until the sky outside lightened, sharing fears and hopes in equal measure. A few days later, I found myself walking into his apartment, nervous in a way I hadn't been since college. He was waiting for me, a little awkward but smiling nonetheless. I've been thinking, he started, maybe it's time I told my sister. My heart skipped. Really? Yeah. She's always been supportive, even when I was dating girls. I think she'd understand. We spent the afternoon drafting a text, crafting words that felt honest but not overwhelming. When he hit send, I saw the release in his exhale, a mixture of relief and anxiety. That evening, his phone buzzed with a reply. His sister's message was warm and accepting, full of love and encouragement. Watching Ben's face lighten was one of those moments I knew I'd carry with me forever. As the days passed, Ben and I grew more comfortable exploring this new side of our relationship. We went on dates, awkward first dates that somehow felt familiar because we already knew each other so well. We held hands walking through crowded streets, shared stolen kisses in quiet corners, and learned how to be more than friends without losing the foundation we'd built. But it wasn't all easy. One night, after a particularly rough day at work, Ben pulled away during dinner. I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes darted around the room. "What's going on?" I asked gently. He sighed. "I'm just overwhelmed. Coming out, figuring out who I am, it's a lot. Sometimes I wonder if I'm ready for all this." I reached across the table, grabbing his hand. "You don't have to have it all figured out. I'm here, okay? We'll take it one day at a time." He smiled, gratitude shining through the exhaustion. "Thanks, you're the best thing that's happened to me." That line hit me harder than I expected. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a crush or a fling. It was something real, something worth fighting for. One weekend, we took a trip out of the city to a small cabin by the lake. It was the kind of place where phones lose signal and time slows down. We spent the days hiking, cooking together, and talking about everything from future dreams to past regrets. One evening, sitting by a campfire under a blanket of stars, Ben reached over and took my hand. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd be here. Not like this, but I'm glad I am." "Me too," I replied, feeling the warmth of the fire and the warmth between us. He looked at me, eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "I don't want to hide anymore. I want to be with you openly. No more pretending." My heart was pounding. I want that too. And just like that, with the crackling fire and the night sky as our witnesses, we shared a kiss that felt like a promise, not just of love, but of courage and new beginnings. Back in the city, coming out to more people was a gradual process. Some reactions were better than others, but through it all, Ben and I leaned on each other. We became each other's safe place in a world that didn't always understand. Looking back now, it's wild to think about how far we've come. From college friends who never imagined this could happen, to partners navigating life hand in hand. It hasn't been perfect, and there are still moments of doubt, but with Ben, everything feels possible. So yeah, maybe he was supposed to be my straight best friend, but he turned out to be so much more, and honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. After that trip to the lake, things between Ben and me started to feel more solid, like we were finally stepping into a version of ourselves that we'd both been too scared to admit existed. But as exciting as all of that was, it also meant facing some realities that weren't quite so easy. One afternoon, a couple of weeks after we got back, I was sitting on the couch at Ben's place when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I could tell something was off from the way his smile faltered. "What's up?" I asked, leaning closer. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "It's my parents. They want to talk." That phrase alone sent a pang through my chest. I already knew Ben's family was pretty traditional, the kind that valued appearances and had strong opinions about what their kids should be doing with their lives. The idea of them knowing about us was nerve-wracking for both of us, but obviously, the conversation was inevitable now. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, even though my stomach was doing flip-flops. "Yeah, I think so. Just nervous. I don't know what they'll say, or if they'll even accept it. But I can't keep hiding." I reached over and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "Whatever happens, I'm with you." He looked at me, eyes searching, and for a moment, I thought he might pull me into a hug. Instead, he nodded and locked his phone. The next day, Ben went home to face his parents. I didn't expect much contact, but that night he texted me. It was tough. They had questions, a lot of them. Some of it hurt, but they didn't shut the door completely. That slightly hopeful message was all I needed. We talked on the phone for hours, him unpacking what had been said, me doing my best to be the support he needed. A few days later, he invited me over. When I arrived, he was pacing the living room, eyes a bit red, but determined. "They want to meet you," he said without preamble. I almost choked on my own surprise. "Wait, what?" Like, officially, yeah, they want to get to know the guy who's made me so happy lately. I think it's their way of trying to understand. Part of me wanted to be excited. Like, this was progress, right? But another part was terrified. Meeting the parents of a guy you've known forever is one thing. Meeting the parents of the guy you're trying to build a life with is another level entirely. "Okay," I said finally, swallowing the lump in my throat. "When?" "Tomorrow evening. Dinner at their place." The night before, I barely slept. I ran through every possible scenario in my head and tried to prepare myself for anything. But no amount of rehearsal could quiet the nerves buzzing in my veins. When the doorbell rang the next evening, Ben squeezed my hand and gave me a small, reassuring smile. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." His parents opened the door, and for a moment, everything was quiet. They looked at me cautiously, their eyes flickering between Ben and me like they were trying to decode a puzzle. "Come in, please," his mom said, her voice polite but guarded. Dinner was a mix of awkward conversations and careful questions. They asked about my job, my family, and then, tentatively, about us. I could tell they were trying to understand, trying to reconcile their expectations with this new reality. I answered as honestly as I could, sharing the story of how Ben and I met and how our friendship evolved. I watched Ben's parents closely, searching their faces for any sign of acceptance or rejection. By the end of the night, things hadn't magically changed, but there was a shift, a subtle loosening of the tightness in their expressions, a willingness to listen. When we stepped outside, Ben exhaled deeply. "That went better than I thought." I grinned. "You did great." He looked at me, eyes still a little uncertain but filled with something hopeful. "Thanks for being there. I couldn't have done it without you." The weeks that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. Ben's parents reached out occasionally, asking questions and slowly trying to bridge the gap. It wasn't perfect, and there were moments when it felt like we were walking on eggshells, but at least the door was open. Meanwhile, our relationship deepened in ways I hadn't imagined. We started talking about moving in together, sharing routines, and dreaming about the future, not just as best friends, but as partners. One Sunday morning, as we sipped coffee and watched the sunlight filter through the blinds, Ben turned to me and said, "I'm ready to be out. Fully, no more hiding." I smiled, my heart pounding with pride and love. Me too. So we did it. We came out to friends, to coworkers, to the people in our lives who mattered. Some reactions were warm and welcoming. Others were confusing or distant. But through it all, Ben and I held tight to each other. Looking back now, it's wild to think how far we've come, from that rooftop conversation to building a life together. There have been challenges, moments of doubt, but also an incredible amount of love and growth. Ben was supposed to be my straight best friend, and maybe, in a way, he still is. But now, he's so much more the person I want next to me through everything. And honestly, I can't wait to see where we go from here. Coming out to more people was both liberating and, honestly, kind of exhausting. There were nights when Ben and I would collapse on the couch, heads thrown back, laughing because it felt like we were finally breathing in a world that wasn't holding us underwater. But then there were moments when the weight of others, opinions pressed down on us, testing everything we'd built. One afternoon, a few months after Ben's parents' dinner, we met up at a little cafe we liked. It was the kind of place where the barista knew our order by heart, and the music was always just loud enough to drown out the city noise. We slid into our usual booth, and I noticed Ben seemed quieter than usual. "What's on your mind?" I asked, sipping my latte. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Work's been rough. There's this guy Dave on my team. He's, well, he's not exactly subtle about not being cool with me being out. Makes snide comments, rolls his eyes when I mention you. I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. Have you talked to HR? I'm thinking about it, but I don't want to make a big deal. I'm just tired, you know? Sometimes I wish things would just be normal. I reached across the table, brushing my thumb over his hand. It's not fair, but you're not alone. We'll figure it out. He gave me a grateful smile, though the weariness didn't entirely fade. That night, we talked about it more over text, sharing frustrations and reminding each other why we'd chosen this path, even if it wasn't easy. A couple of weeks later, I surprised Ben with tickets to a concert by one of our favorite bands. It was a small gesture, but I wanted to remind him of the joy we could still find amidst all the chaos. We met up that evening, both buzzing with excitement. The venue was packed, the energy electric, and for a few hours, it felt like nothing else mattered. We sang along, danced like idiots, and held on to each other through the crowd. Afterward, we found a quiet spot outside, the cool night air wrapping around us. You know, Ben said, leaning his head on my shoulder, I'm really glad we have this. Me too, I whispered. We're stronger than any of the crap we face. He turned to look at me, eyes shining. Promise me something? Anything, that we keep being honest. No matter what. I smiled, pulling him closer. Promise. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. A few days after the concert, Ben got a call that shook us both. His sister, the one who'd been so supportive, had been diagnosed with a serious illness. The news hit us like a freight train. Suddenly, everything else felt insignificant. We spent the next weeks juggling hospital visits, doctor appointments, and late-night talks filled with worry and hope. Ben was a rock during it all, but I could see the cracks when he thought no one was watching. One night, after a particularly hard day, he broke down in my arms. I'm scared, he whispered. What if she doesn't get better? What if everything falls apart? I held him tighter. We'll get through this together. Just like always. That experience tested us in ways I hadn't imagined. But it also brought us closer, reminding us of the fragility and beauty of life. Through it all, our relationship deepened, not just in love, but in partnership. We learned to lean on each other, to share burdens, and to find strength in vulnerability. One quiet evening, sitting on our balcony watching the city lights flicker, Ben turned to me. You know, I never thought I'd find this with my straight best friend. I laughed softly. Neither did I, but I'm glad I did. He smiled, brushing a stray curl from my forehead. Me too. Here's to us, whatever comes next. And as I looked into his eyes, I knew that no matter what, we'd face it all together. Because sometimes the best relationships are the ones that surprise you, challenge you, and in the end, become the most important part of your story. There's something quiet and steady about the way life moves when you've finally found your person, someone who's seen all your cracks and still chooses to stand beside you. Ben and I, after everything, the confusion, the late-night talks, the small victories, and the setbacks, we reached that kind of place. A few months ago, we moved in together. Not because it was some dramatic gesture, but because it just felt right. Our apartment isn't perfect. The paint is chipped in places, and our furniture is a mismatched collection of hand-me-downs and impulse buys. But it's ours, filled with laughter, late-night playlists, and the kind of comfortable silences that say more than words ever could. One evening, after a long day, we were sitting on the couch, feet tangled, sharing a bottle of cheap wine, and reminiscing about the absurdity of it all. I looked at Ben, the guy who was supposed to be my straight best friend, the one I thought I'd only ever loved from afar, and felt this overwhelming gratitude. You know, I said softly, I never imagined we'd get here. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. Neither did I, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. We talked about the journey we'd been on, how we'd both changed and grown, how scary it was to be vulnerable, but how freeing it felt to finally be seen. There was no grand declaration, no fireworks, just honesty and a shared sense of belonging. Later that night, as I lay next to him, I realized something important. Love isn't always about big, sweeping moments. Sometimes it's the quiet ones. The way he reaches for my hand without thinking, the way our mornings start with shared coffee and soft smiles, the comfort in knowing that, no matter what, we're in this together. Ben was supposed to be my straight best friend, but he became so much more. He became my partner, my home, my unexpected forever. And in that, I found something I'd been searching for all along. Life isn't perfect, and maybe it never will be. But with him, it feels whole. And honestly, that's more than enough.